Richard Bach, Illusions. I quote, "The truth you speak has no past and no future. It is, and that's all it needs to be." Richard Bach, Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. I like showing you books that are also inspiring, where you can, on your own, use your imagination to go into the subjects we're looking at. There are a couple things that Machiavelli had taught to the princes and the people he advised, and he wrote it in some of his memos. He was very critical of what was going on in Rome with the popes, who he said were simply princes, and the teachings. We know from the Templars, who sailed to America first, and they had maps from the Vatican, that the original so-called Bible text, pre-Gnostic, Gnostic and pre-Gnostic, were really descriptions of accounts of interactions with the extraterrestrials. These texts then were rewritten and edited to exclude the presence of the extraterrestrial human contact. The key to understanding all of this, and we'll be discussing it with Jupiter in Sagittarius next year, is that the humans of that time knew that they were actually interacting with beings from other world. And so the search for America that started possibly in the 12th century by the Templars was also the search, some say, for Atlantis. And Columbus, who sailed 300 years later, after the Templars, also sailed with maps from the Vatican. And the ancient texts that the Vatican holds are showing that the people who sailed thought they were the descendants of Atlantis, and that therefore America was to become the new founding of Atlantis. Machiavelli speaks about these things tangentially when he talks about the Vatican and the political situation in the 15th, 16th century. Again, Pluto in Capricorn time. And he really questioned the Vatican, which for that time was what we would call the deep state now. Again, in the 13th century, the Templars were the first explorers to America, but really the true teachings, they didn't come neither from Machiavelli nor from Loyola, the Jesuit founder. They are more likely from Atlantis, and they would be written by the teachings we know, the true teachings by Thos the Atlantean. And the last point I want to make about the archaeology we saw in the Mediterranean is we need to imagine that possibly Atlantis was built by the giants. You know that the giants came here and built this world and taught the humans how to do architecture, how to run a society, and how to manage everything. So now, is there going to be election in 2020? We'll have to see what happens, but the problem is the alignment that will possibly transform everything happens on the 11th of January, opening phase, and ending around the vernal equinox 2020, which is the 21st of March 2020. So we will have about a 2-month period of transitions where you have Pluto standing at its position at the same point it was when the United States was formed 240 some years ago, and then comes in Saturn, and then Mars, and then Jupiter. So that's a quadruple lineup that triggers everything off. One thought that I have, a school of thought that I have, a theory that I formulated, is that when Saturn, which is the law, and in Capricorn structure, needs to manifest, bring form and order, hits through the line of Pluto, which is deep state really, Federal Reserve, that kind of stuff. It is not impossible that in early 2020 comes a phase where new laws, a new structure, political structure comes about that may either put the deep state to another side, or possibly, and here we go into the Tito timeline, possibly they would figure out, the population, that is not enough just to look at one person who is supposed to be in charge, but that maybe they need to address the entire structure, and which could lead later in 2024 maybe to a regionalization of the United States, say 4, 5, 6 different regions and no more central governments. That is possible in a Pluto Capricorn signature, as we just discussed, looking at 2000 years of cycles. So we'll see what happens.